That is going to be really very interesting and exciting, because we are going to concentrate today on sustainable technologies within urban systems. And basically today's talks are coming from industries. So our agenda for today, I hope you can see my screen, is going to be a set about the role of new technologies, electrifications, big data, and new modes. Basically, as well as that, we have 6 presentations. Jackie is going to join us today, and we are very much delighted to have our host today. Actually, we should be in New York to our department right now, but okay, she is in Nairobi, and she will join us from Nairobi today. Our very first lecture is going to be by Ted Blazer on new technologies in modes of urban transportation. Who is Ted? Ted received his Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Colorado and has worked as program director, coach at New York's Sky Educational Foundation from 1980 to 86. After that, he has worked in different positions at New York Olympic Authority in Lake Placid between 1986 and 2016. There, Mr. Blazer held the position of President, CEO from 1996 to 2016. Since 2018, he is the Vice President of Urban Development at Doppelmayr, USA in Salt Lake City, Utah. And today in his function as Vice President Doppelmayr, Ted is going to give the talk on new technologies in modes of urban transportation. I will stop sharing my screen, Ted, and you are more than welcome to share the insights on this topic.
Okay, I'm very excited to talk about some new technologies in urban transportation. You may have heard about what I'd like to do is go through a little introduction of what the technology is, and then how it's affecting our world today. And then I'm going to give you some examples of what kind of like a beginning class of what the technology is all about, and then some examples. So here we go. So just our company, we're the largest purveyor of aerial ropeways in the world. We have over 15,000 installations in the world, and we're in 96 countries with our installations. A little bit of history, ropeways were actually used way back in 250 BC as people were trying to move things across canyons, and they progressed through time, and it's amazing how it's been part of our life, but we really didn't grasp a hold of it and to see how it could be used in transportation until sometime in the 1800s, when it was actually used to pull cable cars around city streets on the ground through rails. But as we know, the cities are vibrant in our world, and they're ever growing. And still, even though we've had some challenges of late, we know that the cities people are continue to migrate to cities, which creates unbelievable challenges, because we know that the city streets are just so wide at this point. We don't want to just keep throwing buses and things or dig more tunnels. There's actually a different way to do it. And if you look at the city here, you see how it starts to sprawl, and there needs to be connectivity. We also know that our world, we need to protect it. We need to find sustainable ways of moving people, and to be proud of our new future and heritage, and protecting the next generations. So the status quo is no longer what we're looking for. We're looking for new ways of moving people, new technology. And this is what I'm going to talk about today. And there's challenges out there. There's many things that have to fall into place in order to meet all these new desires that people have to move, especially energy efficiency, cost efficiency, eco-friendly. It has to be mobility for all. It has to meet all these stamps in order to be approved for a good city transportation system. And one of the ones that I think is just so important is transportation for all. It ease of mobility for all the people that have different challenges or different things that they're doing. So if you can see this, you can see the video. You can see that some of our urban systems, they're level. They're absolutely level. You don't have to worry about stepping up to anything. You just go right into it. They don't have to stop. They keep moving. Bicycles can go in. You can go in with your strollers. But more importantly, people with special needs, in they go. I'm going to keep moving here. So the thing is, within our systems, they're high availability, meaning there's not a lot of wait. You're only waiting 15 seconds or so for the next cab to come. You're not waiting for like 15 minutes for another bus or another subway system. We can have HVAC and there's seating, information systems. And, you know, they're very, very, very safe. It's the safest means of mass transportation in the world. At one point, in any of our busiest times, we have 10 million people in the air per hour in our systems around the world. So now if you want to look at, you know, how does this relate to moving things, moving people in cities? Well, this new technology, it takes 2,000 cars to move 10,000 people an hour, or it takes 100 buses, or it takes one aerial cable car system. So these are the systems that we have that move people through cable. We're not going to be talking about the two on the right, which are automated people movers or the funicular railway. They're moved by cable also. We're going to be talking today about monocable gondola systems, aerial tramways, and tri-cable systems for urban settings as a new technology. So let's see here. So a ropeway system, first it starts with a drive station, just for a little education. And then there's a return station because the cable has to go up, it has to come back again because it's nothing but a big, big loop. And then there's towers that hold up the cable. Then there's the rope that holds, well, we call it the rope, but it's actually very, very strong cable. And then there's the cabins. And then there's all the safety elements that go along with it to make sure the system operates at 100% efficiency. The rope, the main elements in the station, there's a bull wheel, there's main drives, which are electric motors, and a gearbox, which propels the bull wheel. And then on the return, you have to have a tension on the system so that the cable has give and take, because there's times when there's more people riding it than others, or the weather temperatures affect the cable. So there's a tensioning system to make sure everything stays in good shape. As you come into the station, there's a series of wheels that slow down the cabins, and then people can get on or off, and they speed up again to go out the other side. As I talked about the ropeway main elements, it's actually a wire rope with strands of cable wrapped around one another to give it this unbelievable strength. And you'll see some of the systems that we have, and you'll be just amazed at the load that they can carry. And attached to the rope, then of course is a grip that holds it to the rope on the upper section here. Then there's a hanger, and then there's the compartment that the people ride in. The towers are what hold the cable up, and there's several different kinds. There's on the left, that's an architectural tower. That's in the London system. Then there's the big 3S towers, but they're tubular in construction. And then there's the normal tower that most towers you'll see is just the straight steel going up. And then on top of the towers, the sheave assembly is what holds the cable on. And it's either goes over the sheaves or it goes under the sheaves based on the load. The most widespread urban transportation systems now that we have are monocable gondolas, and they can go up to 4,500 people per hour per direction. And it's got one haul rope, and you can have, like, most of them are like 10 passenger, 8 to 10 passenger. This is a picture of a La Paz, and you can see how it just goes over top of all the obstacles. You can see the spans that they can cover, large spans. This is in Oakland, California. And it's a beautiful setting. You can see in the background, the Oakland, the bay is right back there, but it's one of our beautiful systems here in the United States. There again, you can see just the interesting aspect of these systems as they apply in South America. The other one that we have is the tri-cable detachable gondola. And this has more capacity. You can get 6,000 people per hour, which is 12,000 people you're moving and over long distances. And it's one haul rope, but 2 track ropes to support it. That's why you can have the bigger cabins. And look at the spans you can cover with these. And some of the towers that we've built recently the tallest tower in the world supporting on an aerial gondola, and it's over 700 feet tall, if you can imagine. Something like that. Okay, yeah, and you can see the great distances that they can cover, the spans, and over water, it's very, very adaptable. This actually is in Whistler, BC. I don't know if any of you have been to Whistler, but this is called peak to peak. Then the other type of transportation is it's a reciprocal. There's 2 cabins and they go back and forth. And while they don't carry as many people per hour, they do can operate in very, very high winds, and they're very fast, very high operating speed. The cabin on the right actually holds 230 people per cabin. This is in Norway. Just you can see how it just is able to. If this is a transport lift, also moving people from one part of the city to the other. And I thought this was an interesting one because of the expanse that it can cross. This is in Australia. Then you can also have a tri-cable system that has smaller cabins, and it's more economical. And this holds 15 people per car. Now, you also, what's interesting about the tri-cable system is sometimes you run into construction projects where there's not a bridge over to an island, not a tunnel there, so you can't get equipment. And so you're able to transport equipment across expanses to help with construction projects. So now we're talking, get a little meat of the thing. Why is this it's a good system for the future? Why is it new technology for the future? It's very, very efficient as far as our CO2 emissions, as far as the noise levels, extremely quiet. We now have a direct drive, and we're going without gearboxes in some of our systems. And so it's extremely, extremely quiet. Doesn't take up much of a footprint, so you're not disturbing much of the grounds around the areas, which preserves parks and buildings and memorials, and makes it easy to place the systems in an urban setting. So we're looking at how what are the applications, what can we talk about? Well, let's talk about bridging a system. This is in Koblenz, and you can see this is the way the bus used to have to go to get up to this certain area in the city. And then the cable car went, instead of having to travel all that distance, it takes a 4-minute ride as opposed to a 25-minute ride. And it's very connective, and it goes right across the Rhine River. So you've got a beautiful way to cover the expanse of a river. Many cities have, they're divided by waterways, and you either have to put a bridge in or a tunnel in, or you can put in a system like this, and they go in very quickly. Most installations, once you get the permits in place, you're looking at about 12 months to put them in. So now let's we're calling creating transport networks. This system I'm talking to you about now is in La Paz, Bolivia. You can see how it jumps around the different parts of the city. And I've actually got a nice video here this actually looks, if you thought about it, it almost looks like a subway map, right? Or a bus map that you might, you go to the city, you get your map to see where you're going to go. This is an aerial ropeway map, and it's got, there's multiple stations, multiple routes, and I'll tell you about how many people it moves here shortly. And let me get to the video. Can everybody see the video? Okay. This is La Paz, Bolivia. And what I think you'll find interesting here is the stations, the ease of people getting on and off, the interconnectivity, the ability to span and go over normal streets, go under bridges. One's going one way, the other's going the other way. It becomes part of their daily life. just like much like people ride a bus or a subway, but these are more efficient. And I got to tell you, there's a lot of peace of mind. Instead of going into a tunnel or in, underneath the ground to go and do your transit, you're up above. You get to see the world. It puts you in a different space, a different place. So this system has 10 lines. It's moved millions of people since we put it in 2016. Record daily passenger is 500,000 people a day, and it's 31 kilometers of system. So it's very expansive. We also did a study. We wanted to compare our system. It was done independently, I might add, by a third party. So our company did not do it. So the evidence that came from this is from a third party. And it was to compare the different types of systems, whether it's a trolley or a bus or a small bus, and compared to an aerial ropeway system. And we gave them all the same parameters. And what we found out is the cradle to grave, that our system, most of the use for our system or the energy expended to put it together is during operations. And operations is you can use green, you can use sustainable power to run the system. So it basically has a zero carbon footprint. And when you compare that to others, it's dramatic as far as how our systems are much more friendly to the environment. Which we know this is where we have to head in our world. We have to. So when it comes to that, cost savings because of how friendly it is to the environment and to your pocketbook, but how friendly it is as far as not damaging the environment. This is a station, it just shows you how life can go uninterrupted down below. You still have your streets and things are going on, but you have your aerial stations, and then you get off. There could be shops in there, there could be doctors' offices, there could be pharmacies, all sorts of things that help make it easier for people to operate within an urban area. Now, let's talk about extending. This is in Bogota, Colombia. The bus line comes in, and then people can get off the bus line, and then they get on the aerial ropeway system, and they go up into a residential or housing areas, and it can split off, and it can move people up to areas that before would take hours to get there. A tremendous amount of time to transport. So the beauty is it's interconnected with other types and modes of transportation. It's a new technology to be able to do that. This is a bird's eye view. So another way of filling gaps. Now there's parts of London that, because of the Thames River, there's things functioning over there, things over here. And so this was installed. You can see the huge towers. Did I miss a slide there? Yes. It goes right over the river, no problem. And it was installed for the Olympics in 2012, still functioning today as part of their urban network of transportation. Now we're going to talk about an aerial tramway. This is in Portland, Oregon. It was installed because they had problems moving people from down in the lower section of the city up to a hospital area. And the roads were getting congested, and the traffic sometimes was snarled because of snow and rain that would and ice that would get on the roadway. So they put in an aerial tramway system, and it connects in with the light rail system, and also people, they ride their bikes, and it led to an unbelievable amount of economic development around the base station. And also a little cottage business industry started because people like to ride their bikes, and then they go to work riding the tramway up to the hospital. A newest system that we've installed is in Mexico City. You can see how it goes easily right over top of the buildings. 6 stations. This one took 18 months within a city to construct. Also, we're talking about a lot of our systems now. We're thinking about there's difficulty with staffing and all these things that make it challenges for businesses to operate. And we now have systems around the world that are automated, where just like an APM comes in or something on a regular basis, boom, boom. Our systems are where the cabins are readily available, always available. You get on, you go, it's automated. There's a person that's in a central location that's monitoring the whole system to make it work. And with that, I probably went too fast, but I wanted to leave some time for some questions. And it's just, I'm so excited about being with you to talk about this, because we've heard about these things in ski areas, but it's so applicable to urban settings and as a future new technology for moving people. And it's used in South American countries and some in Asia, but in North America, it's ripe to discuss this with urban planners. I go to universities, I speak to engineering classes, sessions like this, and I travel around. I'm going to be leaving again tomorrow on a multi-city stop. And to me, it's exciting about where we're headed with this sustainable new technology for moving people in a good and efficient way.
Thank you so much, Ted. It was such an inspiring talk. I didn't expect anything else. Yeah, it's a fascinating technology, and I also believe we have to make this transformation towards more sustainable urban systems. And this solution seems to be really very interesting. As to me, I also like to be above the hill rather than underground. So. Yeah. Once again, thank you so much, Ted. We have a huge audience from all over the world. We have also some people who I bet know about Doppelmayr, because you have told also about Mexico City. I guess Alma, one of our participants, is coming from Mexico City. Koblenz case you have shown, Fabian is living not far away from Koblenz. So we are very much aware of this solution, and it's fascinating. So people, you have the time, use the chance to ask as many questions as you like. I will go, Elton, go ahead. There are some applauses, thumbs up for the presentation in the chat. And there are also some other questions in the chat, but first of all, Elton, go ahead.
Okay, Professor Lenny, thank you. And Professor Teddy, thank you for your fascinating explanation. And my question is basically like, as we saw your presentation, it seems that the kind of transportation fits in the seats of the seats near from sea, because we see lakes and water and something like that. And of course, we saw the Colombia and others. But my question is, why we should to the first one is, what's the difference between subway and ropeways? Because I noticed that the ropeways give you a point, you get on in point A and get off in point B. So if you start your travel, you just to get off in the second point, it's far from the punctuation. In a subway, you have a kind of point that you can get off. So I live in São Paulo, and the people here, we have 13 million people. And almost 5 million people have used the transportation every day. My question is, why we should adopt the ropeways or trams in the cables instead of subways? Thank you very much.
A couple of reasons. First of all, it takes an awful lot of time to dig tunnels and to navigate them in the direction where you want to go, where it may take years and years and years and years. And budgets have to be extreme. The cost per mile to build tunnels and subways it's very expensive. The aerial ropeway systems, it's a fraction of the cost, and it takes a fraction of the time. And as I went back to the slide, if you can see the slide that I have up now, this is actually to go to your point about point A to point B. Yes, you can see the green line goes to point A to point B, but it has several stops along the way. It connects with the yellow line or the blue line, and that has several stops along the way. That blue line then connects with the white line or goes up to a gold line that has several stops. So you can see how it could be interconnected, and there just doesn't have to be point A to point B. There can be stops along the way.
I see. Okay,
thank you so much.
Professor, but sorry, but just one question. And do you recommend this kind of transportation for cities that don't have subways? Because here we have a spider, a web of the subways here. It's long, so it's to adopt this kind of solution is not will be in the first plan. But what do you recommend for cities that don't have subways?
For cities that do not have subways, that continue to have traffic issues, that have pollution issues, that have connectivity issues, this is a solution that should be discussed with the city leaders, city planners, and we have offices throughout the world that we can send a representative to give the basic discussion, like I did with you all, which is, gosh, what is this all about? How do they work? You're talking about in the air, but what does that mean? We can go right to the basics and discuss how it works, how safe they are, and the amount of people that can be moved, and for the fraction of the cost, and the short building time window that it takes to install the system.
Yeah,
thank you, Professor. Thank you.
Thank you. That was also a question written in the chat about the safety. So you have touched upon this point. We have 2 more hands. Please, could you be as precise and as short in your question as you can, yeah? Because we have no time. Morty, go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. Maybe technology is very important. Especially my question is relating to in what extent is this electrification technology maybe minimizing carbon emission, Professor?
Yes, well, and thank you for that title, although I haven't earned it. I'm just like anybody else. I wish I was a professor, but I'm not. But thank you for that. I appreciate it. With the electric part of it, it's it's unbelievable because the small amount of electricity it really takes to move this ropeway system, because most of them, in city areas, they're flat. There's not a lot of, while you could if you had to, but there's not a lot of aerial gain that you have to, vertical gain that you have to accomplish. So you have a motor system that drives the ropeway to keep it moving, and it's done very efficiently. Now the power for that, the 483 phase power, and you can readily get that off the grid. You can get sustainable power, whether it's from wind or from water or from whatever systems you would like to buy it from. And so then you're running a system that's basically neutral. That's the beauty of it. I think that's our future, is to be able to operate. We see what's happening with smaller vehicles, with electrification. It's part of our life. It's part of what our new technology can be in moving mass amounts of people. And we also, and I didn't play a video because I didn't want to just get bogged down with that, but we have new technology coming out now, which is going from a cable system into a rail with the same cabin switches into a rail that goes around corners, which is a big thing because with a cable, you really can't go around corners unless you get off or it slows down, turns, and makes a corner. With a rail, it'll be able to turn with that same cabin, and then that cabin can also go into a station and settle down on wheels and be electrically moved through electric system on a path to drop somebody off, pick somebody up, drop everybody off, and then that same cab can go into a station and be used for delivery, to deliver goods to a store. So it's a multifunctional future technology system that we're working on now with our new ropeway systems.
Okay,
Great.
thank you. Thank you.
Thanks
I would invite you, and maybe Dr. Annie could help. I'll send a link. It's called Insights, and it's on our website. And it's a great look into the future to see how we can, through this very efficient system, not only move people, but we can move goods with the same cabin at the same time.
That's what fascinates me as well. The kind of combination between passenger and freight logistics. That would be great. Okay, Fagner, is it a very short question? Very quick?
Yes, it is. Professor, just I know the system in La Paz, and it's just fantastic. It's something that's very impressive. Just in La Paz, it's a very specific geographic situation, but can you like share something like how the cost is about the kilometer if you consider a normal geographic situation for the between the cable system and the metro system to implement this, because I know that is very fantastic for different situations, like is La Paz and El Alto. And in El Alto, you have the cable among the main avenue, so that's very nice to see. But just to see the cost of the to implement the system in a regular city geographical topic.
I'm gonna address the La Paz El Alto system. What is, I think, one of the most significant parts about that is there were people that were living in El Alto that had to work down below in the city, and it would take a tremendous amount of time, such a long time, and the streets were snarled with traffic, pollution. So generally, a lot of people would have to find a little closet or a little place with a cot to spend the night, and they would stay Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then Friday they go home to their families. And now, let's say a mother can live in El Alto, she can take the cable car down now to her job and go home at night and be with the family. It's transformative. It's that major as far as a person's life and keeping families intact, and having grandparents be able to go from the upper area, take the cable car down to go to the pharmacy or the doctor's office or to the grocery store. It's just, I mean, when you think of all those kind of social issues that are being accomplished. Now, to get to your cost, fraction of the cost, I would say it's a quarter of the cost and even less time, you know, when you compare it to doing any other kind of either putting a rail system in or an elevated monorail or an underground system. Like I say, 12 to 18 months for installation within a city system, and at a very small cost compared to the capital cost of other systems.
Thank you, Professor. It's fantastic.
Thank you so much, Ted. It was really our pleasure for having you here with us. I thank you very much for your time. And if you wish, surely you can stay with us. There are
How many people do we have today in our group? How many people are on?
Yeah, at this moment there are 34.
Great.
coming from Singapore, from African different countries to said Mexico and Brazil, also New York and surely Germany. So it's really truly international. Different kinds of levels we have from bachelor until associated and assistant professors. So it's really very heterogeneous.
So Dr. Annie, could I ask you then if anybody has a question, if you could give them my email address, I'd be more than happy to address. I'd be more than happy to hook whatever part of the world they're from, Singapore, you name it. I know the people that manage those regions, and I can put them in contact with the person with the question. And I also want to wish and extend my heartfelt wishes for everyone for a safe, bountiful holiday season coming up. No matter where you are or who you are, I think our world is going to get is great, but it's going to get better. And with all of you trying to do that, working together, I think we've got nothing but good things to look forward to.
Thank you so much. It's very inspiring. Thank you. Enjoy your day, and I wish you a very, very Merry Christmas. I know we won't meet until then. Enjoy the time.
Okay, Merry Christmas, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, Ted.
Bye.
Bye. So Ted is going to, stop the sharing, and now we go forward with our next speaker. And today we have with us Professor, and this time he is really Professor Thomas Siegmann from Hochschule Rhine-Waal. Who is Professor Siegmann? He has studied economics as well as law in Berlin, Freiburg, and Basel. In 2010, he obtained his doctorate at the Technical University of Ilmenau. Between 2007 and 2012, he worked as a regulatory expert at a telecommunication company, where he collaborated with many national, European, and international committees, like Business and Industry Advisory Committee at the OECD, International Chamber of Commerce. Since 2011, he is a professor of industrial economics and corporate financing at the Rhine-Waal University of Applied Sciences in Kleve, Germany. His special focus is on behavioral questions of network industries. In the frames of the project CONUS, which is being basically led by us, Center of Logistics and Traffic, Professor Siegmann is doing research on autonomous mobility, as well as he is focusing on acceptance and trust of artificial intelligence. And today he is going to give us a talk about the CONUS Living Lab Autonomous Public Transport. Professor Siegmann, you have the word. We are very much looking forward to your talk.
Perfect. Thank you very much for this kind introduction. I hope you can all hear me properly. This morning, actually, I did have some rather severe troubles with my internet connection while teaching remotely. So whenever problems pop up, please just inform me about it. Then I will try to change something about it. So before I start, I just wanted to say that I found this first presentation really exciting and inspiring, and I enjoyed it very much listening. I missed the beginning, the first 5 minutes or so, but the rest I was able to attend, and yeah, it's really talking about, because we talk about multimodal transportation systems. This is really one of the more unusual, so to say, but I think really high potential systems. So let me share my slides with you quickly. I didn't bring that many, but a few slides for you. Living Lab Autonomous Public Transportation, as Annie mentioned it, this is part of this CONUS project, which is a competence network of living labs on logistics, on mobility, and also with a strong focus on sustainability. And this is, so to say, what public transportation, of course, is also about. It's about mobility, but other than maybe individual mobility, more about sustainable future mobility. Yeah, and the living lab that I am actually heading is this living lab on autonomous public transportation. And just last week, actually, we did have a big event at our university about the, because one of such autonomous public buses actually was transferred to our university last week, so that we have a new toy, so to say, to play with and to try to answer some of our research questions, making use of this public autonomous bus. Yeah? But before I talk more about this vehicle in particular, I want to start a little bit more broadly about certain developments, global developments, mega trends that you are surely all familiar with, that somehow are the starting point of this debate or discussion about the future of public transportation. And some of these mega trends I've just listed here on the slide. Urbanization, that was also a topic of the first presentation for today. And also the other side of urbanization, yeah, rural areas that are very often lacking more and more public infrastructure nowadays. Sometimes the school bus being the only bus connection left in certain regions, digital transformation or digitalization in general. And this brings us very quickly then to the topic of autonomous transportation, and be it individual transportation, with Tesla being, so to say, most advanced on the software side currently, and also public transportation. And as we will see, the future of mobility cannot just be a digitalization, electrification of current systems, of current individual mobility systems, but to solve future challenges, in particular sustainability and also demographic challenges, urbanization, and so on. We need something more. It's not sufficient to replace, let's say, the current combustion-based individual cars with autonomously driving and electrified cars. This will not be the solution to some of the challenges. And why not? Well, because beyond CO2 emissions, which is definitely a very important aspect of sustainable future mobility, there are also other challenges. And one is, for example, a limit of infrastructure, transportation infrastructure, in particular in densely populated areas. And here there is, for example, colleagues from the University of Technology in Berlin who conducted a very interesting study where they investigated the utilization of such transportation infrastructure in case of robo-taxis, autonomous taxis driving around the city. And this was like a simulation done by these colleagues. And they found out actually that infrastructure usage will increase by the replacement of individual cars by robot-taxis. And this shows to you that maybe this type of individual traffic might also not be the solution, and that public transportation will also in the future play a very important role. Shortage of bus drivers. This is a debate in Germany that is very important currently, about a lack of skilled labor force, and this extends also to this field of bus drivers. And here autonomous systems are, of course, well equipped to potentially find solutions. And I mentioned it already, lack of public transportation in rural areas, because public transportation, if it happens autonomously and if it does not need bus drivers, it can prospectively in the future, for certain not today, but in the future, also lead to significant cost reductions, and could therefore also be a solution to some of these mobility problems in rural, in non-urban areas. So in general, as mobility and transportation is so important, And as it is confronted with a long list of challenges and affected also by interdependent megatrends, there's, I feel, a huge need for research, for pilot studies, for cooperation between private companies, universities, academics, and so on. And this is actually what we are trying to do in our Living Lab autonomous public transportation. So the idea is not to do basic research in a closed shop university environment, but the idea of Living Labs is to, from the very beginning of the research process, to include all relevant stakeholders, including the business side, including the users, the potential future users, including civil authorities, the municipalities, and so on. And the ultimate goal of our Living Lab is to learn about potentials of autonomous public vehicles, and in particular also about topics like acceptance. So also for the first presentation about these cable cars, safety concerns, I think, was one of the points in the questions at the end of the discussion. And this is, of course, safety concerns, also something that is of high relevance in the context of autonomous vehicles. And I think the message is equally positive, that we can say this is a technology that has the potential to increase safety, road safety in this context, but this is not necessarily the feeling that users of these systems have, maybe because of a lack of direct control. If you're not steering the wheel on your own anymore, and if there's no bus driver that you can at least look at and talk to and trust in, then maybe your individual safety feeling might deviate from something like an more objective safety standard. So what we are doing in our Living Lab, this is maybe, now I talk to an international audience. This focus of our Living Lab, however, was more on Germany, actually, because besides the technical aspects and the technological development, which is definitely happening on a global scale, when it comes into the specific implementation of projects, you are very often confronted with legal complexity, so to say, with legal challenges that you need to deal with, and this is then more an issue of national legislation. Having said so, this does of course not mean that we cannot draw general conclusions beyond the national level. In particular, if it comes to consumer acceptance questions, then these conclusions are more general in nature. Also for Germany, however, if you look at the landscape about autonomous vehicles, what you can observe is by now a rather long list of rather small pilot studies, let me put it this way. So we are still far away from a situation where autonomous public transportation becomes normal, or is a viable business case, but it's something that is more in the that belongs more to the research and development departments of public transportation companies or universities currently. To give you a number, in Germany there are more than 40, I think 42, 43 pilots across the country where autonomous public buses are tested. And there are certain challenges in the sense that many of these projects are not sufficiently connected to each other. And this, of course, bears the risk that certain island solutions are developed, and that one pilot is not learning from the other pilot. And this also has something to do with this academic debate about open science and and so on. So how much information is publicly available on these more than 40 pilot studies, and to contribute a little bit towards this open knowledge, open science idea. Actually, in our living lab, we did get in touch with all of these 40 something initiatives, and via interviews, via a survey, via individual talks and visits. And the idea was, and this is part of this CONUS idea in general, was to foster interconnection among these different pilots. And on the next slide, I have summarized a few results of this of one of the surveys that we actually conducted among these living labs. And this is now n is equal to 17. Yeah, so here to this study, not all filled in the entire questionnaire, so we needed to exclude some just didn't reply, but maybe not so important. But I just want to highlight here, if we and this somehow underlines what I've mentioned, that we are talking about something that is not fully developed yet. Most of the initiatives that are using public vehicles currently are not doing it in public areas, but in non-public areas. And this is the same approach that we are also having at our university. The bus will operate on our campus, but not on a public road. And this is one possibility to reduce a little bit the legal complexity involved in implementing such solutions. Drives on demand, this is in particular for rural areas, something that we were very interested in, and unfortunately most of the public buses are not as technologically developed that they could also be implemented as on-demand traffic. And last point, user acceptance here, our experience is that actually the acceptance of users increases significantly once pilots are implemented and users are actually gaining experience in these autonomous systems. And many users have actually experience with autonomous systems already if it comes to sky trains, aerial tramlines, trains, because for these systems, the complexity is much lower and autonomous solutions have been implemented much on a timeline much earlier, but experience with autonomous cars and buses is much less spread, and therefore also acceptance is sometimes a very important issue. Willingness to use autonomous vehicles, this is what we were then most interested in, and we conducted surveys not just among these pilots, but also among potential users in Kleve, where our university is based on, and where we were planning to implement an autonomous bus. And some of the points that are also described in the literature somewhere else is that young people, in particular male people, highly educated people, people living in urban areas, are more willing to accept or are more interested also in driverless public buses. And some of the fears, so to say, regard security issues, road security, cyber security, and also ethical perspectives. One topic that we are in particular interested in is also the interaction between autonomous vehicles and other participants in a multi-modal environment. We are also we investigated also possibilities for autonomous buses in pedestrian zones, for example. And here, these ethical points sometimes might come into play, like how in certain potential accident situations, how do autonomous systems make decisions here. I need to speed up a little bit. So what you find here, just very quickly, we investigated 3 different scenarios. how does trust in autonomous vehicles differ depending on whether there still is a steward on board, or whether the vehicle is really completely not just self-driving, but also there is no physical operator in the bus anymore. And you can see that the existence of a steward, even if he does not operate the bus at all anymore, increases trust in this and the willingness to use of these systems quite significantly. Factors in general affecting the willingness to use public transportation besides trust is performance expectancy. And this is one of the problems with autonomous buses. If they drive only 15 kilometers per hour, you could say that maybe performance expectancy is not met of consumers. Experience, I've mentioned it, once people experience autonomous systems, they gain trust in these systems, and technological interest, for example, is also something that is highly relevant. Yeah, our original idea actually was to operate our autonomous bus in a pedestrian zone. We actually discarded this idea because of the complexity and safety considerations, legal considerations. But what we did, however, is some more academic work on this idea of having an autonomous bus interacting with pedestrians. And we did this via simulation studies. And how this looks like, I can show it to you. Here in the small books now. Small simulation. What you can see is this really abstract. This white point here. This is the autonomous bus. All the blue areas are in our mathematical simulation pedestrians walking through the pedestrian zone, and these violet points are actually bus stops. And what you can see here now is that depending on how many pedestrians are actually present and how they interfere with the bus can operate on this pedestrian zone faster or slower. And this is to show to you that such mathematical simulations can help to analyze from an academic standpoint now the viability of having buses in pedestrian zones, because in the parameter settings of these models, you can just change the density in this pedestrian zone and then analyze whether it makes a difference, whether the bus runs through an urban pedestrian zone with many people interacting with the bus, or is running through a pedestrian zone, for example, in a rural area where there's not so much interaction. Yeah, just one quick example of some of the research that we are doing. Trust in algorithms. Maybe I skipped this slide. We are also investigating these points a bit more general, because autonomous transportation, you could also argue, is just one application of artificial intelligence. And here, what we find, maybe let me leave it with this one sentence, very fruitful is an interdisciplinary approach where we apply, for example, economic theory in combination with psychological testing to identify such factors that influence trust in different algorithmic systems. Last, just very quickly about the autonomous bus that we are operating at our university. Here you find a picture of it. It's as most of these systems, it's a very small car with a little capacity. Maximum speed is painted here on the window, 15 kilometers per hour. So it's not really going very fast. And this bus has been used in the real world already, for example, to transport passengers from an airplane to a terminal building. And one of the frustrating experiences was that some passengers rejected to use the bus because they found walking speed quicker than the speed of this bus. So you can see that we're really here at a stage also of technological development that is still research, and that is not really a viable business case in any sense whatsoever. The approach to such research must always be interdisciplinary. This is our main belief, ideally transdisciplinary, including also business and consumers, because the questions are too complex to be answered by one discipline or by academics alone. Okay, and with this information, I would finish my presentation for today, and so that we have a little bit time for questions also. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Siegmann. It was very nice to see that there is a really great success in our CONUS Living Lab of autonomous bus system. So we have probably some questions. Thank you. Is coming is not to create employment problems. Another question in the chat we see.
Sorry, this was, does it create employment problems?
Yeah, I think the question is going to the direction, what happens if the bus is autonomous, so there will be no bus driver, so employment problem.
Okay, I mean, this is about digitalization, a very general question also. What happens if certain jobs are replaced by algorithms, so to say? Yeah? So on a positive side, actually, at least in let's say in Western industrialized countries, there's really scarcity of bus drivers. So in this sense, this potential in the future to replace bus drivers is something that addresses this challenge. Yeah? Now, of course, you could also formulate it negatively, that there's a certain risk that certain people will lose their jobs in the future. And this is, for digitalization in general, one of the challenges that somehow needs to be addressed. And there are different approaches how to deal with it. An alternative research project that I'm also part of investigates, for example, questions of unconditional basic income as maybe one possible answer to certain employment problems that might arise due to digitalization, which is a very controversial issue. And I don't want to say here at this point whether it's a good solution or a bad solution. We're just objectively, so to say, investigating it using academic methods, but this would be one possibility. Or to have I mean, like in Germany, where you have a very stable social security system, maybe these points will not be so pressing compared to other world regions where the situation might be more dramatic then.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Siegmann. Are there any other questions? I don't see anything coming in the chat. If it's not the case, I would like to make a short pause until 3:30. And we have here Pedro Maron, who was actually going to be our next speaker. But Pedro, would it be possible for you to conduct your speech at 4:30 or 4:20? So that we take UPS at 3:30 with us. I think Pedro is not listening to us.
Yes, I was muted.
Okay.
4:30, is that the?
4:30, would it be possible for you?
That would be possible, yes.
Oh, that's really very great. Thank you so much. Thank you. So we will take then the pause for 10 minutes, and we will be back at 3:30 with UPS. Yeah. Enjoyed your coffee or tea? We are back now, and we have our next guest speaker with us. I will start sharing again my screen so that we know where we are. Okay. So, everybody, now it's my pleasure to welcome Peter Harris from UPS, who will be giving us a talk on sustainable logistics, UPS case study. Peter is the Vice President of International Sustainability at UPS. He joined UPS in 1989 and progressed through various positions of increasing seniority in automotive, industrial engineering, and compliance before accepting the role of Sustainability Director for Europe in 2011. He took on his current role in 2020 with responsibility for managing all aspects of sustainability for the organization, from innovation coordination to public policy development. Peter is a director of the SEMO partnership in the UK and is a member of the UK government's Net Zero Transport Board. He also served on the UK's Green Innovation Policy Commission. Prior to UPS, Peter worked for 4 years with London Transport and for 2 years with voluntary service overseas in Indonesia. Peter holds a master's degree in engineering from Cambridge University, UK. He is also a chartered engineer and a fellow of Institution of Mechanical Engineering. Peter, it's my pleasure having you here. I will stop sharing my screen. The word is yours.
Thank you, Annie. It's a pleasure to be with you and to be with everybody this afternoon. Let me share my screen. Hoping you can see that.
Yes, we can. Perfect.
Excellent. So I would like this afternoon, if I may, to present a UPS case study on sustainable logistics. So I intend to talk for maybe 20 minutes and then take some questions and some discussion. So firstly, a few words about UPS as an organization. We're a global logistics business, so we move things around the planet. And you can see from the numbers here that we do that at some scale. We're a very asset-intensive business, which means we operate a fleet of aircraft. We have a large fleet of ground vehicles, and that plays into our sustainability agenda. So to determine what to focus on when we pursue sustainability at UPS, we start with the global mega trends, urbanization, emerging markets, e-commerce, climate change, urban pollution, competition for talent. And we then try to distill out of that the important things that we should focus on as an organization in order to become sustainable. And one of the clearest messages we get from all of our stakeholders is that the single biggest challenge we need to address, and this links to our asset intensiveness as an organization, is the elimination of emissions, both greenhouse gas, but also urban air pollutants. So I'm going to concentrate on this priority this afternoon, as I think this is probably the most important one for us to discuss and most relevant to today's conversation. And I think we need to start by asking ourselves what happens when we burn fuel in order to understand this debate. So if we burn a fossil fuel in air, as shown on the left-hand side of this simplified equation, then we get water, which is no problem, but we also get CO2, which is a problem because it's a greenhouse gas. And it's a particular problem for the sector that UPS is in, the transportation sector, because if you look at this chart for the EU, dating back over the past 3 decades, you will see that almost all of the segments of the economy that have moved to the wrong side of the vertical line on the right, in other words, where emissions have increased rather than decreased, almost all of them are transportation related, whether aviation or shipping or ground transport. So we're clearly in the spotlight of the regulators when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions. But that's not the only output on the right-hand side of that chemical equation. There's also a couple of things on the far right in the shape of carbon and nitrous oxides, and those are the urban air pollutants that make our cities look like this. So it's a twin track problem that we need to address: greenhouse gas emissions and urban air pollutants simultaneously. And the societal reaction to this challenge has been becoming understandably more severe over recent times. We're all aware of Greta Thunberg, David Attenborough, Extinction Rebellion, the advent of flight shaming, currently focused mostly on passenger aviation, but a short step, of course, between passengers and freight in this regard. And more recently, Dieselgate, which has certainly, I think, accelerated the decline of diesel as an acceptable fuel. So on the back of that, governments, of course, react. And we've seen this agenda accelerating over recent years in the shape of the Green Deal in the EU and the Fit for 55 regulations on the back of that. The declaration of a climate emergency in the UK. At a more local level, urban access restrictions all over Europe. Every one of the dots on this map represents a city with access restrictions based on vehicle pollution standards that are material to our business. And of course, it's a global challenge, not just about Europe. We've seen declarations from China of carbon neutrality by 2060. And this debate was accelerated recently by COP26, which I had the honor of attending. And certainly my impression there was that this is not a challenge that is going to go away anytime soon. In fact, the impact on all of us will be increasingly severe. So what can we do as an organization? What can we do about emissions? Well, as an engineer, I find it helpful to factorize a problem. I've broken emissions down into 3 factors with these units. And what's interesting about this is that if you look at what it takes to improve each of the factors and therefore to improve the end result of the emissions, it really breaks into a twin track problem. Firstly, efficiency. So reducing the quantity of goods moved and the energy used per unit of goods movement. They're both efficiency challenges, and I'll give some examples of what we can do as an organization about those 2 pillars in a moment. And then the third piece of the factorization, emissions per unit of energy, well, that's really about shifting to new types of technology, new ways of doing things, getting beyond conventional diesel or conventional aviation fuel. So we've got 2 things that we need to do. And let's look at some examples of how we might address each of those in turn. So firstly, with efficiency. This is an interesting example. We have an in-house developed program called Orion. It is basically a giant satellite navigation system that supports our drivers as they are conducting urban distribution work to make their routes more efficient. So our drivers who are delivering in cities every day all over the world, they can drop off and pick up at about up to 120 stops. And the challenge is, how do you make that route as efficient as possible? So you might think it's a simple problem. It's just like the kind of thing you would key into your sat-nav system in your car. The problem is, instead of it being an A to B problem, it's an A to B via C, D, E, F, G, H, I, etc. 120 times. And when you calculate how hard that is, the question is, how many ways are there to deliver 120 stops? And the answer is surprisingly large. In fact, more zeros here. This is a larger number than there are seconds in the age of the Earth. So not surprising then, it's only been relatively recently that it's been possible to use big data cloud computing to solve this problem and to do it better than a skilled human is able to do it. And in fact, our best drivers can still challenge this system and help to make refinements. So a fascinating piece of cutting edge technology, but not the only thing. Some of the efficiency improvements we can make as a business are about more fundamental structure. Our ability to consolidate goods into our assets comes from our scale. So that's an important piece of being efficient as well. The efficiency of our airline is really all about 1,000 small improvements adding up to something substantial. There is no single silver bullet towards making aviation dramatically more efficient, but every little helps. So reducing weight, adding winglets, even improvements in engine washing techniques can make a difference. And then packaging can be surprisingly influential as well. Not so much because of savings in cardboard, important though that is, but it's more about the space that's in a package. So a typical shipper's packaging, the goods that they submit to our network might look like the picture on the left. And the problem with that is that typically a lot of space is wasted inside the box. So the packaging is not optimized for the goods that are being shipped. When it is optimized, and that's not the same as minimized because there needs to be an element of goods protection, but when it is optimized, then what happens is that the picture on the left turns into the picture on the right. And the thing that's key about this, again, is not the reduction in cardboard, it's the reduction in space, because all of that spare space now can be filled by other customer shipments on the same asset for roughly the same fuel burn and therefore the same emissions. So it makes a material difference to the efficiency of our shipping network if we can optimize packaging. And we have a product called UPS Pack Perfect, which is a laser-based system that we offer to customers, which can help them to implement solutions of this type. It's a great example of where everybody wins, because if this is done well, then clearly the environment wins. We can also win as an organization commercially because we can carry more customer shipments on the same number of assets for the same cost. And the customer wins because what we charge them is based on the dimensions of what they ship. So each customer gets charged less. Everybody wins with a solution like this. Let's move on and talk beyond efficiency about those alternative technology solutions as well, because efficiency, important though it is, will never bend the emissions curve down to zero in the way that we need it to. We need to shift to fundamentally different ways of doing things. And in particular, I'm going to focus on ways of moving beyond the diesel truck. And the question has to be, which alternative technology solutions will be key? And in the business that I'm in, the primary answer to that question for the coming years is electrification. Electrification offers the opportunity for a genuinely zero emissions solution in an efficient way. And energy efficiency is important here because energy that is wasted has to be paid for by somebody. So what does that look like in practice? So for us, in our urban distribution network, so these are the vehicles that are picking up and delivering packages all over cities throughout the world every day, we actually started down the road of vehicle electrification about 10 years ago. And at that time, we were not able to buy anything that did the job off the peg, so to speak. So we started by converting existing diesel vehicles to electric. And that enabled us to learn a lot about what needed to be understood and done to make this a success. And that's led us more recently into a partnership with the startup Arrival, with whom we've co-developed this new design, new concept in urban distribution vehicle that is certainly electric, but more than that, it also incorporates a number of other advanced features around lightweighting, composite materials, advanced construction techniques, etc. All of which have managed to bring the cost of this vehicle down close to parity with its diesel competitor. And that's important because the closer we can get the costs of the solutions, then the more quickly we're able to scale up the deployment of the assets. But it's not just about vehicles in the urban distribution space. We can actually do a lot in the sub-vehicle space with cycle and walker-based solutions that might look like this. And there are lots of different offerings on the market. We've recently worked with a partner to develop the picture you see on the right, which is a four-wheeled e-cycle solution called an e-quad, with a partner device called the e-walker. They both carry the same box that can then be preloaded separate from the wheeled device and brought into town and delivered from there. So in every case, what we do is we bring the volume of the packages into town in some form of container, such as you see on the top left, and then we operate from there with a zero truck solution. And if you go today to Munich or Hamburg or a number of other cities around Europe, you would find very few UPS trucks operating now in the downtown space, and most of our solutions being cycle and walker based. Let's look at the bigger end of the scale with HGVs. So HGVs will electrify over time. The solution might look like this. This is the Tesla Semi, which is a battery motivated HGV, although the jury is out as to whether or not the capacity of the batteries is compatible with adequate load carrying capacity. Possibly the solution might need to look more like this, a catenary supply of electrified roadway. But what is certain is that none of these solutions are available in the short term. In the short term, probably for the next 10 years or more, we will need some form of bridging solution. And there are a number of alternatives available. Our preferred alternative, based on the work that we've done so far, is renewable natural gas. So natural gas, methane, but from a renewable source, organic waste, has the potential to reduce greenhouse gas emissions on a well-to-wheel basis from a vehicle like this by about 80%, possibly more, depending on the exact source of the methane. So we're deploying renewable natural gas vehicles at scale, particularly in the US, but also now in Europe, quite successfully, and they can be very cost effective. I guess the remaining space to talk about briefly is aviation, where what's going to happen in the sky, and electrification is progressing into aviation, starting at the very small scale end of the spectrum with drones, but steadily increasing in size. This is our electric vertical takeoff and landing concept that we're developing right now with beta technologies and due to be launched in 2024. It's going to be a long time though, if ever, frankly, before electrified solutions reach the scale of the today's international aircraft, Boeing 757s or Airbus A330s. That may never happen, and for a very long time, possibly forever, we will need sustainable aviation fuels, liquid drop-in sustainable aviation fuel. And that's a big challenge because at the moment it's very limited in availability and very high on cost. So there's a lot of work to do in that space. One of the challenges with electrification is even if you have the asset on the ground or in the air, you still need to recharge it, and that brings with it the challenges associated with power infrastructure. And for us, if we think about our vehicles, we operate them from buildings in which, before electrification, the power model looked just like this, very simple. The only thing the power had to do was to supply a load connected with lights, belt conveyors, etc. When we start to add electric vehicles to this challenge, then things get tricky. We need to recharge our collection and distribution vehicles in our buildings overnight. We can't use on-street recharging architecture. We don't stop for long enough during the day for that to make much sense for us. So it is an in-building challenge. And when you add EVs to this form of network, what happens is you rapidly overwhelm the capacity of the distribution network, and you're then into the world of upgrades, which are very expensive, very cumbersome. So a few years ago, we formed a consortium to find a smarter solution to this problem. What we discovered was that through the use of smart technologies combined with energy storage, we were able to implement a solution like this that we believe was the world's first fleet-scale smart grid and energy storage solution. It's in central London, and it trebled the number of EVs we were able to recharge overnight without having to upgrade the distribution network. And we're now in the process of making it even smarter to look something like this, so that we can start to think in terms of trading energy supplies with the grid, buying energy when it's at its cheapest, selling it back if necessary. And it's all about driving down the cost of getting recharge energy to our vehicles. And then when we combine this with driving down the cost of the vehicles themselves that I mentioned earlier, we're progressively approaching the point where deploying an EV is as cost effective as deploying a diesel. And when we get to that point, which we're not far from, then the game changes, because it's no longer just about being sustainable, it's also just commercially rational. And that's the point at which scaling up becomes a no-brainer. The power infrastructure challenge is interesting because I think it marks an excellent example of two previously relatively independent economic silos coming together and finding synergies. So in this case, the transport sector and the energy sector, finding solutions to each other's problems. So the energy sector provides a smart solution to our problem in the way that I described. And in return, what the transport sector can do is to provide batteries in the form of the energy storage units in our vehicles that can act as energy buffers to the grid, helping to stabilize renewable energy supplies as we move down the road towards a world of 100% renewable electricity. There is synergy between these previously separate silos, and I think this represents a huge sustainability and financial, economic, commercial opportunity for organizations to be in the thick of and developing business opportunities from. So all of this for our organization gets wrapped up in these global environmental sustainability goals. The headline is our target of carbon neutrality by 2050. It will take us till 2050 to achieve that because of our airline. The airline, as I mentioned, is a tough nut to crack. But we have established ambitious milestones along the way. By 2025, just a few years away now, 40% of all of the fuel we use in our ground operation, so almost half of all of our ground fuel, will be alternative of one shape or form, so not conventional petrol or diesel. And by 2035, so about halfway to our 0 point, we will by then have 30% sustainable aviation fuel in our network, and we will have reduced our carbon intensity by 50%. So we've got a lot to do, and it's all about increasingly rapid implementation of the types of initiatives that I've been describing this afternoon. And there's something that's underway right now that if you get the chance to go to, I would heavily recommend it. It's called Expo 2020. So this is an expo that's taking place in Dubai. It's very interesting. I was there a couple of months ago. It's running from September of this year until the end of March next year, so through the Dubai winter. So the temperature out there now is becoming quite pleasant. I would recommend any time in the next couple of months if you get the chance. And if you do go there, then please look out for some of the solutions I've been talking about. We are a partner of the Expo. We're providing the logistics solutions, and we're demonstrating our smart technologies, our arrival vehicles, and some of our cycle-based solutions as well. So hopefully you get the chance to do that. It's as a terrific few days out. There's a lot to see at the Expo, very thought-provoking. And with that, I will stop. I'll say thank you, and I will be very happy to undertake a conversation and answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you so much, Peter, for this inspiring and very important presentation, because I indeed believe we cannot transform our economic systems until we succeed in transformation in logistics sector. So that's why it's very important to see that UPS is doing such a holistic sustainability improvement program at any level in the company, and it's really inspiring me to stay in urban logistics sector further on.
Thank you, Annie.
Yeah, thank you so much, Peter. We have some time for questions, and I will go to chat to see whether there are any. Yes, Azam, are you also considering Hyperloop systems?
Hyperloops, yes, very interesting. I've had a number of conversations with Hyperloop potential providers. The problem, of course, is the massive capex that's required to implement them in the first place. So we would be very interested in using them. We're not going to be providing the huge capex that's required to get them into place. That's really, I think, more the role of the financial community combined with the public sector. But for sure, if they come into place, then we would be very interested in trialing them and making use of them. I can see them being a competitive alternative to aviation on certain strategic lanes. So very promising.
Right. We have started to make the first negotiations with a smart loop in Hamburg, and it seems that they have the solution to bring the parcels into the city center, but then afterwards the fine distribution is still not being solved. So that could be interesting to collaborate with them. Kus Weng is coming from Singapore, and he asks, can you give us some insights on UPS work with AVs?
With what? Sorry, I missed the last part.
AVs, autonomous vehicles. Yep.
Yes, another interesting field of work. I'm a bit limited on what I can say for commercial confidentiality reasons, but for sure, this will be an important play going forwards. You can imagine, for example, in the urban space, the most important thing that a customer wants from us is personalized delivery for over the last, let's call it last 10 meters. Our customers like to meet UPS delivery providers personally when it comes to taking receipt of and dropping off their package. But that leaves plenty of opportunity for vehicles to be autonomously driven from our typically out-of-town distribution centers to the downtown location, to maybe automatically park themselves, to follow the service provider from customer to customer. So I think that's the kind of world that we will steadily move towards. It's complex because of the liability issues that are associated with dealing with the legal questions in this space, and also some of the investments that are required. But yes, for sure, we are actively researching this, and we're headed towards an interesting future.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Peter. We are just on time for our next lecture. And I have seen that at this moment, right now, we have the absolute maximum density of external speakers being here. So if it's okay for you, I would very much like to take a picture with all of us so that we can share it, if it's okay with you, surely.
Of course, I'll stop sharing so that the screen is clear.
Thank you so much. Fabian or Gohar, could you please moderate the process of smiling?
Yes, we're about to.
Okay, perfect. You have to tell us.
Yeah, I will count down. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think Sarah didn't have his camera on.
Oh, I'm sorry, I haven't seen that.
I have just noticed that. Sarah, could you please turn on your camera? Ah, yeah, perfect. It's again gone.
Okay, yeah. Thanks. Okay, then I'll try for a second time. Okay, 3, 2, 1.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much also, Peter, for being with us. Surely,
thank you, Annie.
Surely all of us, you are more than welcome to stay with us, but we do understand that some of you don't have simply the time to be with us the entire day long. So we will move forward, and we have Bosch with us. Zare, I will again share my screen. And yeah, I'm very much delighted to introduce you to our next speaker, who is Zare Mekartunyan. He is the Global Vertical Manager for Intelligent Transportation Systems at Bosch. He began helping customers create solutions for ITS in 2015, and now leads the market development activities for video as a sensor technologies in this sector. His passion for technology and assisting transportation agencies has led to the development of ITS hardened HD cameras and smart city video analytics at Bosch Security and Safety Systems in Canada. So today, Zare is going to give us a talk on video as a sensor for intelligent mobility. I will stop sharing my screen, and Zare, you have the word. It's my pleasure having you here.
Thank you, Eddie. Thanks for the introduction. Nice to meet you all, and thanks for having me. I will share my screen here. Okay, the share button on Zoom is, oh, where is the share button here?
It's a green arrow.
Oh, right in the middle. How did I miss it? I've been on Teams so much lately that it has changed it up for me. So let me know when you can see my screen.
It's coming. Yes, we see it.
Okay.
Perfect.
So perfect. Some of you may or may not know that video technology has come a long way in the last, let's say, 5 years, and we're exploring new areas to use it, and one of it being smart cities and intelligent traffic. So Bosch has been in this realm for a while. You probably know Bosch from automotive, which is 60% of our business. So we're involved in intelligent parking, things like autonomous vehicle technology, also things like e-mobility and cybersecurity. So we have a wide range of, let's say, smart city solutions. However, our pedigree in automotive, where we design and engineer analytics for autonomous vehicle technology, is now being used for things such as video cameras. So video as a sensor is the Bosch division that I belong in, which is Bosch Building Technologies. And what we've done in the last few years is we're starting to use video as a true sensor. So through a camera, you have what we call excellent video. However, we're able to also do analytics in the camera, not in let's say a server or in another box. And we're also able to derive something called metadata from the camera. So what it does is it visualizes things moving in the video. So things like cars, people, other objects, and what it's doing is generating data based on those movements. And what that allows us to do is record that data with the video or separately, which can go into things like an Azure cloud environment, can go into a SQL database, or into one of our cloud solutions. But what's unique is video is an asset-light method of collecting data rather than putting magnetic pucks in the ground or adding additional hardware. So we're able to take infrastructure and make it smart and in an asset-light way. So something that we're able to do and is do analytics with a probability, or so I should say reliability, of 95% now in all weather environments. So it could be heavy rain, it could be dense traffic, and we're able to derive data such as this, being able to count vehicles, provide you speed, and the metadata includes things like classifications of car, truck, bicycle, pedestrian. Also, we can give you speed that's generated from these movements along with GPS coordinates. So that's what you see here is data for vehicles and trucks and bikes, and then we can also do pedestrians as well. So we're providing you this excellent video, but since we're doing the analytics in the camera, we're able to do things like real-time incident detection, such as a queue building, or in an urban environment, double parking that arises from a curbside parking issue or freight and mobility over congestion. So we can do live incident detection, such as wrong way driving or a pedestrian on a roadway. And these can result from different smart city applications where we have different types of movement or special events. So we're able to do live incident detection. We're able to give you data insights. So with metadata, we can store this in the cloud for over a year. So it's a little bit different. We're able to give you forensic data, and we're able to provide you counts and data going back into the data. So if you're counting people today from the camera and you set those analytics in the camera, you can actually go back and say, well, you know what, I want to count trucks 6 months ago, and you don't even need to look at the data. I mean, the video, you can just pull it from the data, and forensically, you can change your reporting after the fact, which is unique. So you're probably wondering, what does this mean? What does this look like from an architecture standpoint? So we have the video camera, which on the bottom is typically where you would go into this, what we call the security world, go into a network video recorder or a video management system client. However, we're able to take that metadata, the position data, the volume, the counts, the speed, and it could go into a Bosch cloud environment, and we can store that data for a year. And separately, you can, a lot of cities and a lot of large cities have things like digital twins. They have their own data scientists and PhDs. So if you're a large city, you can also do an API and store that into your data lake. So what you're seeing here is the change in AI. And on the right, you're actually seeing the GPS coordinates of the vehicles moving being plotted on a map. So we're able to do this with an accuracy of 95%, and it can give you real-time traffic flow. To give you an idea of over here, we're able to provide you these counts and things such as your vulnerable road user classes. And today we do bicycle versus motorcycles. We're able to split that up, pedestrian versus car, of course. But we're looking at other vulnerable road user classes such as children, people in wheelchairs, people pushing baby strollers, because we find those people need typically longer times to cross. So we're integrating that with traffic controllers to extend crossing times to provide people safe access to roadways and sidewalks. And what we're able to do is in the cloud, and how we get this data is we can really stitch these videos in the cloud and optimize the field of views and forensically go back and add different scenarios that we want to collect data on. So this is excellent for urban planning and urban freight and logistics departments within cities and transportation authorities. So what you see down here is also the heat map. So we're able to give you data on peak rush hour traffic, how that traffic flow tends to change after time. So is it a curbside parking issue? Is it double parking? Is it truly double parking, or is it thick traffic congestion due to rush hour? And this type of data allows you to pinpoint whether it's a curbside issue that which results into double parking, or is it just New York City at rush hour and vehicles are backed up. So this is what allows you to kind of validate that information. And what you see over here is heat mapping, and that's another thing we can do in the cloud. So what you see here is a ski resort with different pedestrian crossings, and we wanted to know if they put a barricade up, will that change the pedestrian flow on the right where people won't jaywalk? So these are things that we can do to validate how you change enforcement, how you change regulations, and if that has a meaningful impact in operations. This is a unique solution that we're doing for pedestrian movement. And as I mentioned, as we start building our vulnerable road user classes, we're actually now starting to talk to the traffic controllers and extending those crossing times. And we can do that in areas where there is fiber connection or areas where we do use LTE or 5G or different other wireless types of communication devices. Over here, this is a video of New York, and I think we have audio here. I'll cut that. So this is a curbside pilot that we have. You'll notice the vehicles are backed up. We're doing pedestrian tracking. There's boxes drawn for curbside. You do see a delivery truck over here, and the concern is that these trucks park for 8-10 hours at a time, and then another delivery truck comes and fills that truck, and then it's kind of their mobile it's their mobile store, if you will. So this over here is also being plotted on the map. So the movement captured by the video, those GPS coordinates are being shown on the map. So once we set the GPS coordinates for the camera and calibrate it, it's providing you GPS coordinates of everything moving. This is roughly our older analytics. This is not our new AI analytics, but I want to show you, see the pedestrian movement here. And this is kind of how it's changed now. Oops, sorry, I hit the wrong button there. And now we are doing detection like this. So with new AI that we've incorporated in the camera, not in the server, we're able to break up clusters. And as you can tell here, there's a lot of people walking. So we've gone from detecting 25 people at a time to over 100. And this is using new AI neural network technology on the camera. So, you know, it starts with great detection and great video, and then how we process that video and having an open architecture. So you can use that data to plan and also validate your efforts. And under the hood, we're actually doing 3D tracking as well. So we're able to give you 3D representations of people being tracked. So what you see in the video was 2D, but we're actually doing 3D, and even in low light, no light environments, we're able to block out vehicle headlights and give you accurate classifications. So that is my talk, and I didn't look at time, but I think
it's perfect,
we'll
Zare.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. I will exit through here and maybe look at the video.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it was very fascinating to see what Bosch is doing in mobility and traffic sector. And because, as you know, we cannot improve the situation unless we can monitor and have quality and high quality and quantity of data. Which is obviously most of the time lacking in logistics and traffic sector, especially in Germany. And that's where Bosch is coming into the play or game. And it's very, very nice to see all these systems emerging. So I would like to ask now our participants whether you have any questions to Zare. Take your time and the opportunity to ask as many questions as you can.
Yep, I'm here. I got my video back on, so I was having some bandwidth limitations there.
Yeah. Generally it takes a little bit time. Yeah, and we see the first question from Carlos. For this neural network compilation, I see you use some kind of digital twin technology to analyze data faster. Do you want to improve more this digital twin?
So yeah, well, we're working with some clients where they have a digital twin. What we're doing is with our neural networks is we can take also existing video and apply the new analytics for testing. So what we've done is we've gone from, let's say, a machine learning platform where we apply filters for rough, like difficult weather environments, and also to train the camera on different types of applications. And the digital twin is more of a validation tool for transportation authorities to kind of validate the data. So that's what we find, and our metadata being derived from the camera is a different way of doing that, rather than using LiDAR or using GPS phone technology or using radar and other devices that traffic authorities use. So yeah, I hope that kind of addresses the question.
Yeah, thank you. Indeed, it addresses the question. Very nice. Thank you. Thank you. Very interesting comments and hands up and thumbs up. Very new ideas. Nice presentation. And I was going just to add a comment because I have seen in your presentation about the curbside management, and we had this topic during our previous session from German Railway, Deutsche Bahn. They are also working on curbside management, and they have developed a new application to optimize the curbside management, because obviously it's a huge problem in small and high density German cities. And it works with communities at this moment. Could be interesting if you are interested to collaborate. I could make the contact to them if you wish.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, are there any more questions? If not, I thank you, Zare, so much for your time and efforts, and we will see each other on Monday, already?
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you,
Yeah.
everyone. I appreciate your interest and the questions. Take care.
Thank you so much. If there
Thank you.
are any more questions coming in, I will just take with me and then give those to
Yeah,
you.
let me know.
I
Okay.
will let you
Talk to
know.
soon.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you, Zara. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, so now we are moving forward, and we have our guest speaker, Professor Pedro Maron. And yeah, he will be giving us a talk on the future of mobility, personnel, multi-modal, and on demand. So who is Pedro Maron? He received his bachelor and master's degree in computer engineering from the University of Michigan in 1998 and his PhD from the University of Freiburg in 2001. After a professorship at the University of Bonn, he is currently full professor at the University of Duisburg-Essen, where he leads the Networked Embedded Systems Group. Pedro is on the board of directors of the Center for Logistics and Traffic. That's why I didn't use the term an external speaker. He belongs to family. And of the newly founded Center for Entrepreneurship from the University of Duisburg-Essen. Pedro is also founder of a Low-Cost Lab, an SME specialized in low-cost solutions for localization in indoor environments, and is also the president of UBC Tech, the European Center for Ubiquitous Technologies and Smart Cities, which counts over 20 institutional partners from industry and academia. Pedro, it's my pleasure to welcome you here, and I'm very, very sorry for this misunderstanding with the time zones. And I thank you very much for staying with us, basically the entire day long. I will stop sharing. And you have the word. Take your time. Thank you, Pedro.
Thank you very much for the introduction. It's an honor to be here. It's a pleasure. Even if the time was not exactly the same, it's okay. I have prepared 3 hours of presentation here, so you will have to bear with me. Now, I actually I was looking at what to present here, and I see that there's a mixture of different kinds of backgrounds and people. Students and more senior people and so on. So I decided to go with something that is slightly academic at the beginning. So slightly, trying to teach you computer science in 4 slides. Okay. And that way you will probably won't have to, to give away your job after digitalization and, all of these AI robots and so on to take over the world, and somebody will have to program them. So you will be ready for that. So let me share my screen. Let's see if I can do that properly. And let's see. And then I can start with my presentation. Can you see that?
Yes, you could do it properly. All is fine.
Okay, so I guess I passed that that part. Okay, so if we talk about the future of mobility, okay, the objective that I have is to actually teach you about zeros and ones. That's the main thing, the main issue. And we've seen quite a few things in the previous presentations, not only dealing with cameras, dealing with how to improve things, how to optimize, for example, the way to run through a city, to do logistics. And all of that starts with actually zeros and ones. And this is going to be my introduction to computer science in 4 slides. And after that, the rest are just details. You will be ready for the world if you want. Okay. So this is a number in binary. Okay, just zeros and ones. The number 1, the number 2, the number 3. And if you continue putting all those numbers together, at some point you decide that some particular representation is going to be a letter, for example, like the letter A. Okay, and if you take these representations and you take all of these numbers and you put them together, you have things that look very very difficult to read, but you see on the right side what they mean, right? I mean, what kind of letters they are representing, and how these files are just being stored, for example, on your computer. If you take those things and you take just one more little concept, which is the concept of logic gates, then you start looking at the possibilities to, by just taking 2 bits to create an and, an or, and not, okay, which are very logical things that you can decide and you can describe in mathematics. And by putting all of those things together, you can do things like logic gates, adding 2 numbers, for example, or even computing with just one type of gate, which is the NOR or the NAND gate. Both are fine. You can actually do everything that a computer can do. So you can create a whole computer by just using one type of gate, which is a NOR gate. And that has been done in the past. It's not very efficient, but it's definitely doable. And that's really, really amazing, because then you can start moving bits around, and you can see that by doing just very, very simple computations on just single bits, just zeros or ones, you can come up with complete applications. You can start writing code that then is compiled and taking into into a different language, which is zeros and ones, so that in the end, by putting all of these things together, these are just not just numbers, or they're not letters. They're actually commands for your computer that to be executed. You can do things like start sorting things, for example, or just deciding what and how what algorithms you're going to be implementing. For example, in this particular case, just to sort an array of numbers. Okay. And if you put all of these things together, you get all of the complexities and all of the stuff that we have been looking at in the previous presentations, and everything that you see and that you can do with your computers right now. Okay, so those are the absolute basics. Except that you don't deal with 1 bit, you don't deal with 8 bits, you deal with kilobytes, with megabytes, with gigabytes, with terabytes, and even more than that. Okay, so here you see some of these Greek prefixes that you can see, and you have things like zettabytes, okay, which looks like a really big number. And if you see that those numbers, you will see that it's actually something that we're using today, because the question is how much data is being produced in every minute. There are some statistics, obviously. And you can do things like, there's about 70 million translations of words every minute that, for example, Google does that. Or, you have almost 7 million, snapshot messages and so on. So you can see here quite a few, statistics about this. And if those numbers seem, not big enough, if you put all of them together, okay, you can take all of the information, all of the data that's produced and has been stored up to date, and that data will tell you later on which one it is. You could, if you put all of that in books, you would have a stack of books that goes from from the Earth to Pluto and back, and that 80 times. Okay. Now that sounds like a lot of data, but bear in mind this was the statistics from 2016, and 2016 means that if we look at the data right now, in 2021. We're having numbers that go, around 74 zettabytes. Okay, so we're talking about, 1 billion times, terabytes, and that's going to go and it's going to increase in the next years. Okay, this is the data that's being produced right now. This is the data that's being stored in all our computers, and that's what we need to deal with. Also, when we deal with applications that have to do with and that deal with this kind of information. So, for example, health or personal mobility, or tourism, travel. All of these things, they have to do with it. And I'm going to concentrate, obviously, today on the personal mobility issues. And I'm going to show you some examples of projects that we have dealt with in the past, and that we're dealing with right now, that take on this concept of personal mobility. And some form of let's say personal algorithms to make sure that people get to the place where they can. So an example is of this process is the project Simon. Simon, it was a European project that finished at some point long time ago, actually, by internet standards. Right, it's an ancient project. Whose goal was to assist impaired users, so people that cannot see well, people that cannot move well, in the process of moving around a specific city, for example. And we had obviously solutions that were based on ICT, or were based on computer science, and they were based on technologies that people already knew, like having a new app, or having a system that that takes them to the right place, using the right mobility mechanisms, using the right medium, and also using the right routes, and so on. And we did that in many different places, in Madrid, in Lisbon, in Parma, and Reading, and also cities where we had quite a few users looking at not only the issues dealing with this type of mobility, but also using the system for some time, and looking at what kind of needs they have, and how we can help them. Now, from a computer science perspective, the architecture looks something like this. So you can see several clouds there, which is good because everybody now knows what the cloud is and how the cloud can be used for these kind of purposes. We have different applications, different apps on a smartphone that people can use to to improve, to talk to the system, to make sure that they get the right information at the right time. And this was done on a basis that was based on different algorithms, routing algorithms for that took into account transportation systems, public transportation systems, trains, buses, subway, cars, obviously walking, and bikes. Okay, and all of those combined to provide you with the best way to go from A to B. And even, and this is one of the things that was kind of interesting, to be able to do this inside, to do all of this kind of routing and a combination of multimodal routing algorithms inside the subway, which is something that you cannot do with GPS right now. So you need to just take these maps and put some systems in there, some infrastructure that allows you to give information to the system about where certain mobile phones are, so that people can then look at this information and see on their mobile phone where they're located and how they can go from A to B in the best place. And this is just an example, a screenshot of how the application looked like, and how this this information was put on a personal basis, looking at not only where you want to go, how you want to go, what kind of transportation system you want to use, but things like what kind of person are you? Do you have any kind of mobility constraints? Are you on a wheelchair, for example, or do you have a stroller with you? And all of this information is also taken into account to make sure that, for example, you're not sent to the through the stairs, for example, that you go through an elevator and you have to go to a different floor. Okay, so all of this information and all of this stuff was computed in the cloud, was computed in a personalized way for whatever needs you had, and then you were presented with the best information. And all of this was obviously part of not only a multi-modal complex of information gathering, but the application was also done in such a way that it was not only good for, let's say, normal people without any kind of constraints, but also for blind people, and also for people that had sight impairments in any kind of way. So again, looking at these personal needs and personal mobility in such a way that things are optimized for your needs. Okay, so that was one of the first project that I wanted to talk about, and the second project is a more recent one. Is one that's actually still going on, and it's closer to home. If you want, we don't have to go to Madrid or to Parma to test this. We actually do this around the university area, let's say. So this is a project that involves the three universities in the Ruhr area. Okay. Dortmund University, Bochum, and the University of Duisburg-Essen. And the idea of this project is to understand and to improve the mobility of mostly students, but also people working at the university, so administration people or just researchers, professors, and so on, to optimize and to improve the way that people can move between different universities and between the different cities that encompass, let's say, these universities. So the idea behind this is to look at the demand, the needs of mobility for each one of these different groups, and to see how technology and how and not only an application but different kinds of routing algorithms can help in providing the best kind of mobility and the best kind of routing protocols for these different groups. So what we did and what we are doing, but this is something that's obviously ongoing, is we're looking at not only visualizing the information that you need and putting together and integrating lots of different data from the public transportation system in the different cities, and the VRR, which is the the public transportation, let's say, conglomerate in the area, but also adding information about your own needs. What kind of classes do you have? When is your lecture? When is it done? Are there 25 other people, for example, that would like to go to the same place at the same time? So would you be able and willing to share a shuttle to go to that place? Because maybe public transportation is not good enough. And also, and this is also very important, if you look at the presentation that Peter did, for example, from UPS, can you do this in an electric way? So is it enough? And do we have the infrastructure and also the infrastructure from the point of view of vehicles that are charged and ready to provide this kind of transportation to the group of students or the group of people that have to move from, let's say, the University of Duisburg-Essen to Waal. Yeah. Okay. Now, from a technical point of view, the integration that you need to perform is spatial. Obviously, it's temporal, it's spatial temporal. You need to combine both both dimensions in a meaningful way. And what you need to do also is to include lots of other information sources, like bikes. Okay, so if one of the things that's kind of interesting, at least in Germany, is that some of the tickets that you can buy, especially if you're a student or if you have a monthly ticket for public transportation, is that you're also allowed to hire or to rent a bike. Okay, and you can just take it pretty much anywhere. So there's also information from Nextbike that's also encoded in this area. Here you see the different stops that you have from the point of view of buses, subway if you have one, and trains and so on in the Ruhr area, so in the area going from Duisburg to Dortmund, and you can see that there's quite a few, but you also see that there are some areas that are more populated, let's say, than others with respect to the amount of stops that you have in there. But you might have some areas that are less represented, and you want to to provide a better means of transportation or different kind of transportation that go beyond the public transportation system. So what we need to do is we need to map not only the stops but also the routes from these public transportation systems. And we actually see that even though you have quite a few stops, there are not too many routes that go all over the place. And even though you might have two different areas that are close to each other from the point of view of, let's say, using a car, it might take you, I don't know, half an hour to go from A to B. But with public transportation, because you have to take, you have to change your route and change buses several times, it might actually take you up to 2 hours. Okay, and obviously that's something that doesn't really work well, and is not sustainable, does not help the environment, and so on, because it's quite a huge difference from taking a car to going through a public transportation system. Okay, so this is what we did in this visualization, and you see what the difference is, and how different areas are, let's say, greener than others with respect to the difference in trip duration taking from public transportation system to a let's say individual transportation system like a car. And you see that not all areas are exactly the same and have the same kind of difference. So there are some white spots, let's say, that you could try to improve on. Okay, and if you take also into account other kinds of mobility data, like the use, for example, of Next, the bike company Next Bike, to see where exactly this kind of public system or public transportation system is used, you see that you have quite a few hotspots that are not only let's say all over the city, but they concentrate mostly and especially on train stations and on main stations in the subway and in the tram area. Okay, so here you see, for example, the mobility of these bikes and how people are actually using them, in which areas they're using them in the city, going from A to B. And you see that most of them are actually going to either the main station or going from let's say more remote areas in the city to the main station, which you see on the right, for example, which actually indicates that this is a very good, let's say, last mile transportation system for people that take the train and go to other cities by combining maybe a public transportation system, Next Bike, and the train system. Okay, so that's mostly what I wanted to tell you about. I hope you know now everything that you need to know about computer science, and at least 2 projects that are related to the fact that mobility has to be personal. You need to take all of that information that we have and massage it in such a way that my information, the result that I get from the system, is going to be and will have to be completely different from the one that you get, because our needs are also different. And you might be, let's say, more mobile. I'm older, so I wouldn't like to walk that much and so on. And all of that stuff, if you take it into account, you have lots and lots of data that without the proper visualizations and without the proper algorithms will not be able to give you the answer and the result that you expect from a system like this. And as a result, you will end up trying to continue using the old methods, which are you go by car because it's more convenient. And that's probably not what we want to do if we want to have a sustainable and environmentally friendly system. So thanks a lot for the for listening, and I'm very happy to take questions if you have some.
Thank you very much, Pedro. It was very informative. I like the structure a lot to give us the basics and then how we can apply those. And just a comment to what you have said. Yes, I'm already perfect in computer science. Learned a lot. No, not yet.
I'll give you the certificate when we're done.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, we have indeed a question. We will take Jackie's question. Jackie, go ahead, please.
Hi. That was a great presentation. I've learned a lot about computer science, but I have some questions about data and data governance. What is your approach to who should be really managing these, what some people call mobility as a service platforms, where you have this integrated, data that allows you to map out really seamless trips using multiple modes? And how important are data standards? And I'm curious what kinds of data formats you used, because you talked about all these different formats floating around, and then when you want to integrate, it's often incredibly difficult. And so getting more people to use the same standards would make everything more efficient. But I'm just curious what your take on all of that is. And I loved your presentation. It was great.
Thank you very much. Those are great questions that you're posing. I mean, they're very, very interesting and very important things. So the first one, who should be responsible for this data? There are 2 different takes on this. So there's the take that says, well, this should be some central organization, maybe the government, maybe some public body that deals with that. That has the problem that all of that information is concentrated in one spot. And if you look at most of the privacy concerns that people have, and we are also doing quite a bit of research in that direction, the take that many companies are having now is to say, well, let's just separate the data. So once you have different silos, let's say, different places where data is located. So I'm responsible, for example, for the Nextbike information. I'm Nextbike as a company, and I have my information, and I don't care about the rest. But if you're able and you're willing to take that information and integrate it somewhere else, that's okay. But as long as we don't do that ourselves, we don't correlate the data with other stuff, we're fine from a data protection point of view, okay? Which obviously is very, very important, especially in Europe. Now, if all of these, all of these companies and all of these different institutions do exactly the same thing, then the problem, let's say, of integrating that data and putting it together is something that can be done on an individual basis by and for the people that actually need it. So I might be willing to say, well, I'm going to pay, or I'm happy with the government, doing that, with some public body doing that, and they should, combine information from these different places so to give me better service. But that's probably not what everybody is going to take. So as long as we have different companies and different public bodies offering this kind of integration possibilities, then things become at least not completely, let's say, tightened by one particular company or even public bodies. So that brings obviously the next problem, which is the possibility of integrating things with different standards and so on. There are some standards that you can use. So most of them are based on JSON and on the JSON format, or on GeoJSON, which is a special format that deals with geo information, GTFS data, and so on. So all of that is what most people are actually using to provide mobility information, at least from the data sources that we have. And then the second very important thing is, if you're going to integrate data, if you're going to integrate all of this information in some kind of system, the architecture itself has to be also standard. And for that, right now, it's great that we are, let's say, 20, 30, 40 years into the internet. Right now, it sounds strange, but the internet started in 1969. Okay, obviously not at the level that we have right now. But right now, you have many standards that deal with, let's say, web standards and things like, web app technology that is so, let's say, so common right now and so normal that people definitely want to use that and have to use that if they want to be on the internet right now. So those kind of technologies based on REST APIs and based on web technologies and maybe Angular and stuff like that, that's becoming or has become the de facto standard, and people use that. So integration is possible. It's not trivial. It's not simple, but it's definitely there. That was a long answer to yes, we can do both. Okay. Any more questions?
Thank you so much, Pedro. Yeah, indeed, there is a comment, very complex, but informative and very nice presentation. And there is another question going to the direction of connection or transfer from one type of traffic to another one. How is it possible and how can we consider this?
Okay, what do you mean exactly? Also, the connection of transfer from one to another. So let's say the technical part on how to do that. Okay, so the technical answer for that is you need to have both data sources. You need to have information about both types of let's say transportation systems or mobility models, and then once you have that in a common database, then you have to provide, and you make a, let's say, a combined query that looks at both systems. The problem that you usually have is not, both systems usually don't have the same entry points, don't have the same stops, they don't have the same the same exits, for example, and they might not have the same metrics to give you or to tell you which one of the routes is better. So is it better to go from A to B using this particular route or the other particular route? Well, it depends. If you're interested in speed, it might be one. If you're interested in, let's say, reducing the CO2 footprint, then it's the other one, okay? So all of that has to be taken into account. And if you combine both, say, two different data sources in that way, then you're allowed to create and to get a combined query that you then have to present to the user in such a way that they think they come from the same data source, even though in reality they don't.
Okay, great. I guess there are no questions anymore, or somebody wants to jump in. At least I don't see any in the chat at this moment, but still you can surely write the questions here. I will take them, and if Pedro doesn't mind, I will give you these questions at some later point.
Sure, you can just give them my email address. I'm happy to answer questions offline, no problem.
Thank you so much, Pedro, and especially special thanks for your flexibility to stay with us for such a long time. Sorry for this inconvenience.
No problem. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, with this, we are left one more presentation coming from our host, Jackie. Jackie, would you mind if we take a short break, because 3 presentations are quite a lot. We need to digest and take some coffee, if you don't mind.
Of course.
Okay, we get back in 15 minutes. So many people are writing that they are back. And Jackie, I will just leave the floor yours. I have your biography here. We wanted to introduce you, but I think we don't need to do this because basically you are our host and it's not me to introduce you. So probably you just take over and then start your presentation. I'm very much looking forward to listen to you.
Sure. So I'm Jackie Klopp. I'm really pleased to be one of the hosts for this wonderful winter school, not summer school, on transportation. I'm based at the Center for Sustainable Urban Development at the Climate School at Columbia University here in New York. And a lot of my work has been on African cities, and that's where I'm going to take you today. So it's a real honor to be the last speaker, and I think I'm going to raise some big picture issues that we can continue to think about. And so let's just jump in. So today I'm going to take you to Nairobi, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about climate change, which is an enormous problem, perhaps one of the biggest ones facing us as humans, and transportation is a key element in solving some of our climate change problems, reducing emissions. But there's some problematic politics around urban transport and infrastructure that I'm going to talk about that links to actually to some of the data conversation that we just had with Pedro. So very big picture in Africa is that urbanization is really happening at a rapid rate. It's really an unprecedented amount of city building, and it's all happening in an age of climate change. And how the urban transport infrastructure is built matters profoundly. I like this quote by Alex Marshall that every city built has really grown from the spine of its transportation system, like flesh around bones, whether it's a river, a trail, a railroad, or a highway. So how you build this infrastructure and how you operate transport is really going to shape your city well into the future. And the current trends globally, but also in African cities, are not good. Air pollution is increasing and transport plays a major role in that. We have high levels of crashes. It's a #1 killer of youth globally, but also in Africa. Congestion, which has economic implications. There's even obesity problems because people are not necessarily using active transport, especially the middle class. There's a huge vulnerability to climate change and shocks. And even though Africa's really contributed very little to our climate crisis, it is incredibly vulnerable. And I also like to point out that as Europe and the United States, Japan, other places in the world move their fleets to electric vehicles, there will be a glut of other vehicles, these used vehicles, and a lot of times those end up in places like Africa and Asia. So there's some really big picture issues here, and we really need to pay attention to Africa as we move forward. Now, there's some really positive things, and that is that the vast majority of urban residents in African cities take public transport or they walk. And it's an enormous opportunity to try to support these cities in building very high quality public transport and non-motorized transport facilities. So Nairobi, where I do a lot of work, the capital of Kenya in East Africa, we see when we did a survey that 75% of people, pretty much 71%, every day use the little buses that they call matatus. They have different names across Africa, and a lot of people walk. And more people would use bicycles if the infrastructure was there. Now, there's a really big problem. It's a problem for a lot of us, which is that investment is still mostly going into carbon intensive, regressive, and highly dangerous infrastructure that does not cater for the majority of the people. Why is this, and how do we shift it, and how can we also use data in this struggle is really important. I was just in Nairobi, and they're building an enormous expressway, which will be a toll road that will have, people who will pay for using mostly a car traffic to sort of zoom over top of the rest of the city that will still be struggling with its transport problems. In any case, one of the reasons that I have concluded that we see this kind of problematic investment is there is a political economy around these large infrastructure projects, particularly highways, that persists. Flyberg in Oxford talks about the political economy of the economic and sublime. So politicians love these big projects. They often cater to the elite. So road-based, car-based projects. And there are a lot of people who make a lot of money off of the land value changes that occur, and there's a whole politics around that. So there's these entrenched interests around continuing on a path towards car-based infrastructure. And that's not unique to Africa, but it's certainly a problem if this is going to be the basis of these cities that are rapidly growing, then we're going to replicate many of the problems we've seen in the United States and elsewhere. And the other thing that really struck me looking at Nairobi and some other African cities with colleagues is that when you look at the planning documents around transport, the existing bus system is often missing. And you get these kinds of visions for the future that are highly car-based. So if you look at the image there, that is from a visioning document for Nairobi. And you can see that it is just car-based. There's no pedestrians, no public transit. And I had discovered that this was actually photoshopped from a picture in Beijing. So the landscape is from China. And my Chinese colleagues pointed that out to me at a meeting in Beijing. So this is not a good way to do transport planning. And we seem to replicate the same kinds of problematic infrastructure. As I mentioned, while that kind of top-down planning is happening in a lot of African cities, what really allows people to move around are the systems of minibuses called matatus in Nairobi. And like I say, 71% of people get into these vehicles every day to get to their jobs and to school and to facilities that they need, like shopping or whatever. This is very common in large numbers of cities in the world, that these systems exist. I call them popular transport because the majority of people use them. They often are quite popular. They include like mini tuk-tuks and motorcycle taxis. And they're run by private entities, so it's very hard often to organize them. So very different kind of transport system than what Pedro was talking about in European cities, right? And since this is actually the most common form of transport on the globe, we really need to start to think about how do we engage with it. And what's interesting is Pedro also talked about the increasing number of on-demand services. Many of these services are on demand, and you're starting to see companies like Via, Bolt, others coming from, outside and running services, and people are very familiar with these kinds of shared mobility services because they use them all the time, but they do have their own unique characteristics. So we need, as we talk about transport globally, to kind of understand these systems. And when we look at these systems, one of the first things we note is all the beautiful data that Pedro was talking about simply does not exist. So this is a major, major problem in terms of having digital infrastructure to improve transport. There's a huge digital infrastructure inequality problem here. So when my colleagues and I looked at Nairobi and realized that these minibuses, matatus are everywhere, they are the transport system and there isn't data, that we noticed created a lot of problems. There's no maps, there's no apps, there's the beautiful app that, Pedro showed wasn't existing. How do you plan? How do you understand the dynamics without this data? And what about accountability around our sustainable development goals? So this is a major problem, that there is this data gap for these popular transport systems. So a number of my colleagues with funding from the Rockefeller Foundation got together and created the Digital Matatus project to really create this kind of digital data for popular transport systems. We asked ourselves, how can we really leverage the ubiquitous nature of cell phone use in Nairobi, Kenya, like to capture data about these systems? And the rapid expansion of cell phones globally is an opportunity to get geospatial data for these transport systems. A lot of big companies, by the way, are already gathering data. As you use their apps, they're using your private data and doing analytics on it and so forth. And this question that I asked Pedro is really important about, who is controlling this data and how is it used for the public good? And I like this quote from the International Transport Workers Federation, and a city run on data has to collect that data. And then who collects that data is really an incredibly, and knows how to use it, is an incredibly powerful player in that city. And so as we go to African cities, or actually any city, this question about how are we going to have really good public guidelines for how to use this critical resource is really, really important, especially if you want to get good public planning and use good data for that planning. So the Digital Matatus project basically was about leveraging cell phones, doing do-it-yourself collection from the bottom up, having university students from the University of Nairobi Computer Science Department who use these matatus every day, go out and figure out how to map the routes. It's quite a complex problem. You figure out where the main termini are and find out what are all the routes, and you're starting from scratch. You have to create a protocol to collect the data. And then one of the reasons I asked Pedro that question is having a standardized format is really important, because you can then feed it into a lot of open source tools. And then we also really want to be able to develop open data. It's a really important problem when you have a scarce resource and it's really needed for innovation and public planning purpose. Trying to create these open data systems is very important, of course, with respecting privacy. And so we went about to do this. And we were then able to create the first map of the Matatu system for Nairobi. And it was allowing people also to see the sort of entirety of their existing public transport system and start to ask really important questions like, how does the network work? How can we redesign it? How can we improve it? And because it's primarily a system of private actors, what you see, which is typical of privately run transport systems, is that most of the operators want to be where they can maximize their profit, not necessarily generate the best transit system for everybody. And so they all want to be at the center of the city, and you see a whole set of these termini, and in downtown Nairobi, and it creates a lot of kind of flow problems. So by collecting this data, generating these maps, you know, and I should say it's you know, it's hard because these systems often, you know, in Nairobi, they're fairly regular where they go. In other systems, they're not. So there are a lot of challenges to creating, you know, visualizations. So, and this is, you know, somewhat incorrect because some of these routes might slightly vary or so forth, but at least it gives you a basis to start to do some planning and thinking. Once we created this data and made it open, all of a sudden actors like the World Bank started to appropriate it and use it, for example, to study what we really care about, which is not moving, mobility, but really access, like how do you get to services? And they could see that physical access, not obviously having the money to pay for these services, but just being able to get to them, which is the first part, was fairly high by Matatu. So the Matatus created a lot of access to services in Nairobi. Subsequent studies have showed that, you know, by improving these systems, you could radically improve access and also reduce the travel times. You can also start looking at the transport problem as a land use problem, which they're really tied together. I don't know if that has come up in these discussions yet, but so for example, the World Bank mapped access to hospitals within a 30-minute Matatu ride. And you see this picture here. If you're a poor person, you definitely want to be in the center of Nairobi, which is actually where a lot of the old poor neighborhoods, sometimes called slums, are. Because you can walk, or you have a very short Matatu ride and you access a lot of services like hospitals. One way to solve this problem is to, you know, distribute some of these resources more equitably around the city. Or obviously you can try to improve the public transport system, or both ideally. But you can start by visualizing it, seeing it as also a land use problem. You can also look at equity, very, very important. I did a study with my colleagues, again, looking at access, just physical access, not being able to pay, to health facilities. And you can compare modes. And clearly, if you walk, again, you want to be in the center. And you can see the Matatu creates enormous amount of access again. But if you can drive, you have the best access. And so you can see the inequality in access based on mode, which is a real problem. So I really want to emphasize that we can really start to do this analysis with these popular transport systems. And more recently, one of the things that's happened in Africa, which is really great, is that more funding, especially from Europe, I work with the French Development Agency, GIZ, a lot of money is going into public transport systems, but mostly, again, through these big projects like bus rapid transit, as you see here. But a lot of times these systems don't work as expected. And one of the reasons is that they're being planned a lot of times without really looking at the entire popular transport network in the city. And so just as Pedro was talking about the need to integrate, if you can't have integrated trips to go from A to B in a city, but you can go fast down one corridor, you may still decide to take the Matatus as opposed to the BRT, because you care about going from A to B, not just fast down one corridor. So this integrated planning that Pedro talked about is really important. And so we're talking a lot to these development partners that are funding these larger projects and encouraging this kind of data infrastructure and thinking more about integrating these really neglected popular modes into planning. So the other thing that is a bit of a shift in thinking is instead of looking at these popular modes as the problem and that you're going to replace them with what you might find in Europe, the big buses and nice rail. We want, you certainly want that for African cities, but in the meantime, this is actually the bus system. And, as Pedro was talking about the shared mobility systems, these are going to play a role. Like even in European cities, people are talking about like the minibuses and shared mobility and, like I talk with my Swedish colleagues about, in places that are less dense, off-peak times, maybe you want to shift to a different kind of mode that looks a lot more like a matatu. But one of the things that needs to happen is we can't just invest in these big projects. We need to really work with these systems to improve them. And there's been some really interesting work in South Africa. And I've also been talking to my colleagues about how to electrify these systems. So there's a lot of innovation that can be done. And also one of the things we proved with the project is that, again, as Pedro was talking about, accessibility is part information, that we can get this kind of information up on platforms like Google Maps. But it's hard. There are real issues. And one of the issues, we were just in a meeting this morning about this, is that you really need to build capacity in cities to work with digital infrastructures. And given the scarcity of data in these African cities, you really need to create a way of encouraging more of the data production and also sharing. And so my French colleagues and this network with our Digital Matatus team has come up with really promoting a digital commons approach through something we call Digital Transport for Africa, where we really encourage open source tools to do the data collection and open source tools to analyze data. And we have repositories of data, and we encourage the open standardized format so people can really use it. So we're really trying to support that kind of capacity in African cities. So some of the next steps in all of this, first of all, if any of you are really interested about these kinds of problems and these sorts of digital infrastructure inequalities that we need to work on, reach out to me. I would say that we really need a lot more work on understanding sort of these existing indigenous transport systems, the politics and the infrastructure needs. We need to explore the politics of opening up and democratizing planning, so infrastructure really meets the needs. Infrastructure and operation really meets the needs of the citizens, and we need, because we are in a race for time. Like, people will, if their public transportation system is really not safe, it's not working well, they're going to try to find personalized means. And we know that that is carbon intensive and has all kinds of problems associated with it. So we really need to figure out how to think about moving this forward rapidly. And in terms of improving these systems. And again, we need to build a digital commons, open, shared, anonymized data for transport. And also on emissions, I'm not sure if we talked about that, but there's still a lot of questions about what emissions really look like in a lot of cities. A lot of the modeling is done based on European models again, but what a van might do in a European city is very different from what a van might do, and the fuels are different. And so we may have even much higher emissions, for example, in some of the African Asian cities than we currently understand, and that's an important question. And then also really we need to, this is for my policy colleagues, think about financing for different kinds of infrastructure and different kinds of projects. Because the finance people know how to fund these big projects, but how to get some of the soft operations, digital infrastructure, these kinds of things that are essential is still a problem. So I'm going to leave you there with some activists in Nairobi who are trying to prevent, problematic infrastructure and sort of transport developments in their city. So I don't know if anyone has any questions, but that's kind of the big projects that I'm involved in.
Thank you so much, Jackie. It was very inspiring to see what is happening in the global south. Yeah, indeed, you are absolutely right. We have been talking about the data from also Bosch. We had Bosch today here with us, but most of the time we forget indeed that good urban planning relies on the good quality and quantity of the data. And it's very nice to see that you are engaged in this kind of collaborative mobility projects. We have also carried out some of them here in Germany. It seems really to be very difficult. As soon as you get the policy makers and the just normal citizens at the same table, you will never find a good conclusion. It's difficult, at least at this moment. So we have some questions. How long did it take to make the Motor 2 map in Nairobi?
Yeah, that's a great question, Stephen. So it took us quite a long time because when we started, there wasn't a lot to work on in terms of this kind of project. So we had to start from scratch and develop protocols and think about the standard, which we decided would be this general transit feed specification. I don't know if, so Pedro mentioned that it's a standard that's used a lot in the US, also, I guess, in Europe. So we had to figure out how do we put these systems in that data in that standard. There's still big challenges and a discussion around that. So it took us about a year and a half. But now, since there have been a lot of other mapping projects we've engaged in with colleagues, like in Cairo and Addis and elsewhere, and they can do the mapping much faster. But to do it well, like especially in a city like Cairo, it takes a lot of like really understanding, you know, where everything is, because you don't have data to start with, usually not a lot of data. So, but we can do mapping in a city like Nairobi now pretty quickly. We have a much better method. And we have all the tools and things. So yeah, so now I think you could do a city maybe in depending on its size, you know, 3 or 4 months with a proper team in place.
Mm-hmm. There is a very interesting question. I was going to ask this question on my own, but it's here. So many poor people live in rural areas and they commute to the city centers. Do you kind of engage with this kind of urban-rural connection in your in your research?
Yeah, that's a great question. So you can, I mean, actually intercity bus, like from and just stopping in sort of rural, I guess they stop sort of in the main towns in some of the rural areas. That's pretty good, easy data to collect. And then if you're talking about like the metropolitan development, where there's a lot of people really in more rural or peri-urban areas, and then they move into the city. Yeah, we absolutely have to get these metropolitan links. And so that's a huge issue for Nairobi. The population swells by about 1 million people, if you can imagine, during the day, which is so, yeah, we absolutely try to get those metropolitan routes. That's very important. And rural transport's very important too. So actually my colleagues who work in this open data GTFS space have worked with the state of Vermont, actually, to work on figuring out a sort of on-demand services for rural people, because bus service is really a problem for rural people. And so creating good data infrastructure, like Pedro was saying, with on demand, so they can know how many people in an area need a bus. Like, so that's all very important. And you need to do this kind of mapping and figuring out what kind of data standard you're going to use.
And I mean, it's obviously not only the problem of African countries. We in Germany also see this problem that city centers are becoming more and more unaffordable for the people to live there, and or not only because of money, but also the poor air quality. And that's why people are kind of going outside the city centers, which is surely a problem for mobility for everyday commuters.
Yes.
Yeah, so Carlos is thanking. And I think that was pretty much all. Jackie, you will be with us on next Friday as well, right?
Yes, absolutely. I'm looking forward to seeing student projects.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. And at this moment, we will be opening again breakout sessions for the work groups. And I guess we have 5 working groups, Gohar, right? And the people will find themselves in their own breakout sessions rooms, and it has worked until now quite well. I have been jumping through working groups to see what is the progress, and there are some very interesting approaches from different perspectives, surely. If you wish, you could also do this hop on, hop off with me today. If not, we can leave it for now today, and the working groups can organize themselves and for the very last session, and then they will have enough time to work on the presentations they are going to share with us next Friday.